Well, hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about refining the surface finish on the RS style spoiler project, adding some body filler onto the lower spoiler, giving it plenty of time to cure, then a good sand, and then admitting I made a mistake with the end plate design, so we'll be refining the angle and improving the interface onto the parts. Then designing the new end plates themselves to go on, giving the lower spoiler a first lick of plastic primer paint just to get a proper look at the surface properties. Then of course, a tasty little test fit at the end, but I won't spoil the surprise. So here we are where we left it at the end of episode 9, and you can see the RS style spoiler lower section mounted on the car there. It's trimmed, it's in good shape, but we need to do some surface refining. So this isopon filler, pretty standard stuff to be honest, a golf ball of filler to a pea of hardener. You mix it up, make sure there's very few air bubbles in, and then you apply. I've probably put a bit too much on, you would say, for a single coat on this, but knowing how rough the surface was, I think there's still a lot of low spots that will need filling later. The next step is to jump over it with a DA, and you can see here a level of smoothness, and I've attached it back onto the car while it dries. Now it's time to get the PPE on, the mask and the gloves, keeping yourself safe, and then diving in with the DA. So 120 grit being used here, doing quite a good job I think of cutting away the surface, getting it ready for yet another layer of body filler. So this is quite hard work, very arduous manual process with lots of patience, lots of waiting, but hopefully some good results. So what you can see here is the rear interface now cured for the vertical strake, just over the brake light cutout. Here it is after it's been dremeled. Okay, yes, it's still roughed, but don't forget it's a prototype part. So next up, adding another layer of filler on top of that. It's very, very pliable, very wet. I'd liken this stage almost to cake decorating. So I found, you can't shape this with a finger. You need to get stuck in with something like a spatula to give some structure, to let you poke and prod and tease the filler to be exactly the shape you want. It's quite a satisfying process, almost a bit like sculpting or doing artwork. So obviously tidying up the edges as best you can, a little bit of scraping to try and get a nice flat surface back on the top there. So there we have it. Moving on to the next stage then, so obviously sanding that down once again, going over with the Dremel and then attacking it with the Hoover without mercy. So really important to try and keep a clean working area with this process. There's a lot of dust generated, and had to take the car outside for a good wash the last couple of days. So now modifying the end plate design, using expanding filler once again. This stuff is awesome. I did a little bit of filleting at the end of the part to squirt in the filler, so I'll get a good adhesion, and then squirting that over the top and building up an end plate. So the intention here will be to cut this back at an angle that matches the rear section, the rear quarter of the car, so the end plate mounts probably at something like a 20-degree angle relative to the vertical on that rear spoiler. So here it is applied. Obviously leaving that to cure for some period of time, probably overnight's a good shout. There's not much to it. You can't really shape it once it's been squirted on because this stuff turns back into like a sticky glue varnish. So there's no hope of giving it any shaping like we were able to with the body filler. So you get what you get. It's messy, but it's actually quite satisfying and you can really cut it away. So here's the part cured overnight. I should have done the sensible thing and put a bit of wax on the table. It's now rock hard and glued itself on. So I'm going to have to dig myself out of this mess. And as with all these processes that are a bit trial and error, I thought I'd whip out a massive hacksaw blade. So the idea here is I just skim along the surface of the table. It's only a cheapy IKEA job, just to free it up from the surface. It's quite tricky to do with one hand actually, but I hope you're enjoying the filming action. So now coming from the front of the part, just to loosen it up, free it from the table, break it away, and then you can have a little look at the delights underneath the spoiler end there. So you can see it actually just expands up to fill all the available space and gives you a nice hard interface to cut against. So the trusty Victorinox knife coming out to save the day again, just doing a quick horizontal skim. Lifting that away, you can see there's still some quite big air bubbles that I'll need to fill inside the structure. Doing another trim just up to the lower surface of the spoiler now, and then to run along the leading edge and to clean that section up as best as possible, and I'll be doing the same on the trailing edge as well. So yeah, it really is quite a rewarding process. You can make quite fast progress with cutting away the foam. Fantastic. So next up, obviously working on the other side of the spoiler, evening it up, and then it's time to crack out the ruler and have a think exactly about the level of overhang increase. So what I'm looking to do is to add something like 2 centimeters of width to the horizontal part of the spoiler. So you can see me marking that up there. And what I'll be doing is rebaiting and cutting that in, leaving behind a good wedge of foam that I can cut and sand and angle that 20 or so degrees to match the back of the car. So laying on my finest knife skills, cutting down vertically. I recommend if you're doing this sort of thing, keep your fingers well clear as you're going down into the material, but you can cut back across quite neatly and just rebait it in. So nice big chunks of foam coming off the spoiler now, looking at trying to get that angle as flat as possible to match the spoiler, and there it is on both sides. Now offering it up to the back of the car, really wanting to try and visualise, and obviously I've still got a lot of the wrapper in the way from protecting the back of the car from resin and body filler and expanding foam, so wanting to peel that back and just have a look at the lovely metallic blue paint underneath. You can see that's obviously quite a square cut relative to the back of the car. So now trying to eyeball it with a trusty Victorinox, whizzing along there, taking off another big slice, trying to cut through a bit of the glass fibre, which is putting up a bit of a fight at the end of the wing there. So you can see I might have slightly overdone it, but I've got a bit of extension on the lower section I can then use to smooth off. So here comes the sanding block. So yeah, just really attacking that to try and finesse it. Obviously doing exactly the same thing on the other side of the car, but I guess as you can see there, it's looking pretty good. Now I'm wanting to get a feel for the surface, so what I'm doing here is applying a plastic primer over the top of all the body filler, something that will be a little bit flexible and adhere well to any kind of remaining exposed fibres. That will then show up imperfections in the surface, so I can really target any further refining of the surface with body fillers, and then eventually I may well be putting down a gel coat over the top of this to give it a nice gloss finish ready for taking moulds. So here it is, now drying out, looking great from a distance, but when you really zoom in, I was a bit frustrated actually with some of the patches and low spots that hadn't quite filled out, but at least I know where to focus the effort. So important to leave that now to dry and to get on with the next stage of the process. So what I'm doing here is mounting up 2 dummy end plates ready for sanding. So this is an expanded polyurethane foam block insulation, which I spoke about in the previous episode. Joining the 2 bits together with cocktail sticks and then going over it again with a DA held as square as I can to try and give them exactly the same outer profile shape. Again, it's one of those amazing processes where you start with nothing and then after about 5 minutes of play you have something that almost resembles a final part that you want to put onto the car. So sanding this away nicely, now getting into the groove of smoothing the parts, rounding the edges and putting a nice radius on the leading and trailing edges there of those parts. It's quite hard to do the kind of concave angles where you're working on the inside of the wing, so you just have to be patient and go slow. And obviously the outside parts are a little bit quicker to get things nice and even. So now just finishing up the very top of the end plate, so that all matches up nicely, and a nice little twirl to show off the handiwork. So I couldn't resist the opportunity to get some cocktail sticks and poke them into the end of the end plate and attach it onto the lower spoiler to get a feeling for what that angle would look like, matching the rear of the Fiesta. So literally, I'm taking the reference of the centre of the old rectangular section as an alignment point, and here you can see both sides on. I've now got the dummy spoiler just to offer up to that to take a look at how the assembly will start to come together. Obviously that's being held a little bit higher than it will sit on the vehicle, but the intention is then to be able to pick up one of the vertical strakes and then to see the fit of that relative to the angles. So you have the rebaited sections just over the rear brake light, you can see there, and obviously the fit should be exactly the same on the other side, so we're making 2 of those. And then the idea is you can take the end plates off, ideally for shipping and allowing you to customise or paint and modify as you like. So here we are, coming to the end of the process. You can see we've got the wing extensions there, a good set of bits, and for now, engineer out. Thanks for watching.